Everybody, and welcome to our Spring 2025 TreeKeepers session. We're very happy to have you. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're glad to have you with us. My name is Enzo Nagao, and I am the Development and Volunteer Coordinator here at our Trees Forever Marion office. Joining me tonight is Jeff Jensen, our Director of Community Programs, and Seth Adamson, our Des Moines Growing Futures Program Coordinator. You'll be hearing more from them in a little bit. So just kind of to give you guys a little bit of context, TreeKeepers is an educational program designed to empower people like you to become advocates and stewards of our urban forests. Whether you're brand new to tree care or you already have a few seasons of planting under your belt, we're hoping that this course is going to give you the knowledge, skills, and confidence to make a real impact. By the end of this class, we're hoping you're going to feel pretty equipped and inspired to take what you've learned and help grow a healthier, more resilient tree canopy in your community. Just a quick kind of notes here before we begin. If you haven't already, there should be an attendance poll on your screen someplace. Please take a minute or so to just enter your name and email into that so we can kind of keep track of attendance and all that good stuff. Also, throughout this presentation, if you could please make sure that you're muted. If you have any questions at any point or any thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat, and probably myself or one of our other presenters tonight will be going through the chat and responding to things as we can, or I'll kind of spotlight your question for one of our presenters during the Q&A session that's going to follow every class. So like I said, there's going to be a Q&A section at the end of every presentation where I'll kind of read out some questions to our presenters. I'll also be putting out a short quiz for people just to kind of, nothing too serious, but just to kind of keep you guys engaged and kind of gauge some of your retention on information like that. I do want to point out that while we all have a lot of extensive experience in the forestry field, we are not necessarily experts on everything. We're just here to kind of share some information that we've learned through our travels and some of the many conferences we've attended. So if we don't know the direct answer to your question, we can certainly do our best to point you in the right direction. So we appreciate you bearing with us on that. This class will be recorded, and recordings will be sent out later this week to everybody who's on the list. And thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to spend a little bit of time with us and learn about trees. So we're very excited here. I'm going to get started here and share my screen. Give me one moment. All righty. Well, welcome to TreeKeepers, everybody. So just kind of an outline of what today is going to kind of look like. I'm going to kick us off with a quick introduction about Trees Forever, talk a little bit about what it means to be a tree keeper. And then Jeff Jensen has a video that he's prepared for us where he's going to talk a little bit about programs and grants and tree biology. Then we'll be turning it over to Seth from our Des Moines office, where he'll be talking about tree identification. Then we'll have some time at the end to do Q&A sections, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. So just some kind of information about our mission. The Trees Forever mission is to plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. Here at Trees Forever, we really care about the environment, about our urban forests, our rural lands, and the communities we live in and our fellow citizens. Our nonprofit organization is headquartered in Marion, Iowa, just kind of as you go towards downtown Marion if you're in the area. And it was founded in 1989 by the fearless Shannon Ramsey. And it continues today with our commitment to connect people to the environment through the planting and care of trees, prairie, and other natural areas. So we're based in Marion, Iowa, like I said. We have around 30 staff members spread around Iowa and Illinois. We have lots of national projects that we're involved in, and we've gotten some recognition for. Throughout our company's history, we've been involved in the planting of about 3.4 million trees and counting. We usually encounter around 7,000 volunteers every year, and we assist 200 plus communities and landowners annually while awarding over $650,000 in grants with technical assistance. And throughout this, our running theme is going to be, if you're interested and you want to hear more, feel free to reach out to us or check out our website at treesforever.org. So who are we really? A lot of what Trees Forever is based around partnerships. We have a lot of valuable partnerships that we cherish. So we're very close with the Iowa and Illinois Departments of Natural Resources. We partner with multiple healthcare organizations in our operating area, many businesses and fellow nonprofits, technology firms, lots and lots of schools, some breweries for our beer lovers in our company, utility providers we work with a lot, private landowners, and most importantly, you. We love working with the community, and really the reason we all come into work and pick our shovels up in the morning is to work with our community and make sure we get some trees out there. Here's a little bit of information about some of our service areas. So we have our Cedar Rapids corridor operation led by Molly Stolke, who is the Director of Programs in Lynn County. Dina Haverick is our Relief Outreach and Communications Manager. Ben Vaughn is our project leader. James Partridge runs our Growing Futures program in Cedar Rapids. And then we have Ted Olson, who's our friendly neighborhood facilities manager. So if you're in the Cedar Rapids area, feel free to stop by or kind of call us if you have any interest in plantings, and I'm sure you'll be hanging out with one of these wonderful people. A little bit about the Des Moines office, our sister office. Megan Schneider is the Director of Programs in Des Moines. Lexi Stone is our Urban Forestry Project Manager. Bianca Cook is our Volunteer and Community Education Coordinator. And Seth Adamson is our Growing Futures Program Coordinator. So if any of you know any high schoolers who are interested in having their first job, learn a little bit about planting trees and make some money on the side, feel free to reach out to Seth or James, and they can tell you a little bit more about our upcoming Growing Future seasons. We also have a number of field coordinators who kind of operate throughout the Iowa, Illinois areas. So you'll be hearing more from them in a little bit. And just a little bit about some of our programs, which Jeff is going to go into more detail in his video. We have Growing Futures that I mentioned, both in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines, where we work with teams of high schoolers to plant trees on the weekends and over the summer. We very frequently have volunteer plantings that we work with local businesses, volunteer groups, charitable organizations, and anything you can imagine, both in Des Moines and Cedar Rapids and beyond. We also have a number of community forestry programs that work throughout rural Iowa and Illinois and different communities like that. And then we have you, our new tree keepers. So tree keepers really make up the core of our volunteer organization, and we will be happy to have you join our ranks. So this is a lot of information, but where do we really begin? So this is an overview of what the training is going to look like for the next 3 sessions. So today is our first session. We're currently talking about our introduction to trees forever. Jeff will be covering tree biology, and then Seth will be covering tree identification. Our next session is going to be on April 1st at the same time, 6 p.m. to 7:30. We'll be talking about tree planting, tree care, and tree pruning. And then on day 3, on April 8th, which is also going to be at the same time, we'll be talking a little bit about pests and diseases, tree benefits, and then we'll just be wrapping up, and that'll be the end of our class. Zoom links and invitations to these will all be sent to you by me, so look for emails from me in the coming weeks on all that. So kind of what do tree keepers do? So kind of what we're hoping you'll get out of this is just learn a little bit about trees and tree care. And then once you become a tree keeper, what does that mean? Well, that means you are one of our trained volunteers. We'll hope to have you come out and help us plant and care for trees in your community. But really what we want is for you to become a voice for the trees in your community. So become an advocate, look after the trees that you see on your streets and your parks. And kind of take the knowledge you've learned here and make sure you become an advocate for them. We have lots of plantings that are always open to tree keepers. I'll be talking about that later, but we always hope to have a good core of tree keeper volunteers to help us on our planting days. Because we've trained you, so we hope to see you out there if you feel up to it. You can also organize tree plantings. So we absolutely encourage you, if you have a park that is in need of trees, talk to us and we can help you organize a tree planting. Or if you have, lots of trees in need of watering or mulch, that is absolutely something you can organize. So we hope to see you guys become leaders. We also have a number of maintenance workshops and additional educational workshops that will be running throughout the year. So once you're a tree keeper, you'll be on our emailing list and you'll receive information about lots of our great workshops online that provide a lot of great information. Some examples of projects you can organize. You could absolutely, watering is something not a lot of people think about, but that is what trees need more than anything. So you can feel free to water on your own or invite adjacent property owners or a group of friends to grab some buckets and water some thirsty trees. You can also weed, remove grass, or provide mulch around trees. We're always looking to grow our network. So if you know anybody who you think would be interested in the Tree Keeper program or would be interested in any of this, feel free to send them our way. And you can also apply for Trees Forever or Iowa DNR grants, which you'll hear more about in a bit. So this is a quote we like to talk about, but every oak tree started out as a couple of nuts who decided to stand their ground. Um, so a lot of people don't know, but Iowa was originally 20% forest. Today, Iowa's around 4%. So that's obviously a huge kind of historical loss of trees. The 2020 derecho certainly didn't help that here in the Cedar Rapids area or any of our, numerous droughts or tornadoes or any of the other natural disasters that Iowa and Illinois suffer through. So what we really hope is that you'll become tree advocates. So, be the eyes and ears for your local trees. If you see lots of trees are dying, contact your local Parks and Recreation Department or Forestry Department. Talk to your city about, bringing out some more waterers or, helping you organize a watering day. Just day-to-day interactions, really, just letting people know about the benefits of trees. Seek support from other people in your community or find out what other communities are doing and share that with your elected officials or members of your community to replicate that. Really, if we want to restore Iowa and Illinois' tree canopy, it's going to take grassroots collective action to get that done. And feel free to talk to Wright or to an elected official. Let them know that you support tree care efforts in your city or address the mayor and city council annually and build relationships with elected officials. Once you kind of prove yourself that you have the skill and know-how to be a valuable tree advocate, they'll see your group as a valuable asset and bring you in if tree issues arise. But I'll be covering this a little bit more during our last session, but this is just sort of a broad overview of what your future looks like as a tree keeper. So we're thrilled to have you guys along with us, and we're looking forward to seeing everything happen. All righty. 1 minute. All righty. Well, so now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Jensen. He's prepared a video for us. So I am going to play the video where he's going to talk a little bit about programs and tree biology. All right. Can everybody see a video?
Yep.
All righty.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs with Trees Forever, and I am jazzed that you're here with us tonight to start your Tree Keeper journey. Just a little bit about me. In my role with Trees Forever, I manage our Iowa and Illinois field staff, implementing planting projects, working with communities to strengthen their urban canopy, and facilitating community planning through the Visioning program and our partnership with Iowa State University. It is verified. I am a little nuts, growing hazelnuts on my farm in north central Iowa, and I'm active with the Iowa Nut Growers Association and the Northern Nut Growers Association. But enough about me. Let's get on to the reason why we're all here. Let's become tree keepers. I'll be starting us off with a quick overview of the programs and grants available through Trees Forever. This won't be all-encompassing, but a quick rundown of funding available primarily to communities for planting natives like trees. Then we're going to switch gears and dive into tree biology, which includes the anatomy of a tree and the physiology or function of the parts of a tree. We have a lot to get through. Luckily, I have some helpers monitoring the chat for questions. So as I'm rolling through my talk, feel free to type in questions you have, and our helpers will answer if they can, or simply wait to the end of my presentation, and I'll be taking questions then as well. Black Hills Energy Power of Trees is a partnership of Black Hills Energy, Trees Forever, and your community to fund tree plantings that save energy, beautify your community, and enhance the environment. It is offered to Iowa communities that are served by Black Hills Energy. Trees can be planted on both public and private property, but to qualify, the trees must relate to energy efficiency. Projects include trees planted in the public right-of-way between streets and buildings, around schools and public buildings. Black Hills Energy provides grants of up to $5,000 per community for community-based tree planting projects. Trees Forever administers the program and provides staff to help community leaders and volunteers plan and complete successful, long-lasting projects. Alliant Energy is a long-term partner with Trees Forever, providing funding to eligible communities for tree plantings on public property. Alliant Energy, Trees Forever, and your community work together to plan, fund, and implement community tree planting projects. The program is designed to encourage energy efficiency, environmental awareness, and community stewardship in Iowa. The 1 Million Trees program is offered exclusively to Iowa and Wisconsin communities, where Alliant Energy provides electrical and/or natural gas service. Planting locations must be within the Alliant Energy Service area and receive energy-saving benefits from the new trees. The utility provides grants up to $5,000 per community. Trees Forever administers and facilitates the program, providing organizational, educational, planning, and planting support through our network of experienced field staff. To apply for an Alliant Energy tree planting grant, complete the application form and submit a project plan and proposal letter. The application process is competitive, and preference is given to applicants with thorough and complete documentation that meets all program guidelines. Project grants are awarded once per year in the fall, but the proposed plantings may occur the following fall or spring. Trees Forever's Recover, Replant, Restore program assists communities in central and southern Illinois to build healthy and diverse community forests. Supported by the U.S. Forest Service and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Trees Forever will help your community recover from and prepare for natural disasters. Man-made disasters, think of things like emerald ash borer and other devastating pests that endanger your community forest. Replant with a diverse, disease and storm-resistant selection of tree species, and restore a healthy and beneficial community forest. Trees Forever can also help your community with technical assistance, forming a tree board, updating or creating tree ordinances, and we can help guide you through the Tree City USA process. Stewards of the Beautiful Land explores the importance of native landscapes and roadsides for multiple benefits. Discover how native plants and trees can work for your community to clean our air, water, and soil, and provide much-needed pollinator habitat. Learn about plant identification, what, where, and how to plant, establishment practices, pollinator habitat needs, threats to native habitats, advocacy opportunities, and available resources for further learning. These programs and grants outlined only represent our outstate Iowa and Illinois communities. Des Moines and Cedar Rapids metro areas also have additional programs and grants applicable to those areas. With coverage like that, the question is, how will you work with Trees Forever? Next up, we're going to take a dive into tree biology, anatomy, and physiology. Okay, let's begin with a little terminology. In this diagram showing a deciduous tree, that's one that loses its leaves, At the top is the central leader, which is the single branch growing straight up from the trunk. Then from that, you have all the branches and leaves, and collectively, we call this the crown of the tree. Of course, you have the trunk, which is the main stem. Moving down from the trunk, if your tree was grafted, you will see the graft union. Whether it's grafted or not, you should see the root flare or collar, which is where the trunk thickens as it becomes root underground. And speaking of underground, that is where the roots are. Let's talk leaves. The leaf is the part of the tree where food is produced through photosynthesis. It's also where the gas exchange, via stomata, allows the intake of carbon dioxide and the release of oxygen. Another primary function of the leaf is transpiration, which regulates temperature and facilitates mineral and water movement in the plant. Looking at the parts of a leaf, we have the tip, then the blade and veins, which are connected to the petiole, and the petiole is connected to the branch or stem. The stipule is simply a leafy-like appendage at the base of the petiole. This blown-up diagram depicts transpiration through the stomata on the leaf. During this process, CO2 is taken in, and water and oxygen are released. Many of us remember as kids the old saying that the trees do the opposite of humans, and that's still correct. We can't have a discussion about trees without briefly talking about the magic that is chlorophyll, a complex molecule that contains chloroplasts which carry out photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the conversion of sunlight into chemical energy like glucose, cellulose, starches, and more that the plant can use as food to grow. Incidentally, as someone who loves pancakes with real maple syrup, I appreciate the chemical energy created by hard maple trees and their sap, allowing me delicious maple syrup. This is the furthest extent that we're going to talk about this subject, because in reality, this could be an almost 30-minute standalone presentation, but it is important to remember the power of photosynthesis and where it takes place, in the leaves of the tree. The twigs and branches are transferring water and nutrients throughout the tree, providing structural support and strength, and produce the leaves, flowers, fruits, and nuts we all love. The anatomy of the twig. Starting at the top, this is going to be your terminal bud, located at the tip of the twig, typically larger than lateral buds. It doesn't have a leaf scar and is also called the apical bud on the lead shoot at the top of the plant. Then you have the bud scales, which are there to provide some protection for the terminal and some lateral buds. Lateral buds will eventually grow into branches and flowers and form along the nodes of the branch. As the name implies, the leaf scar is the scar left after the leaf falls from the twig, and they are distinguishable and one method of helping to actually identify trees. Lenticels are pores that penetrate the surface of the twig and facilitate gas exchange, essentially uptake of CO2 during photosynthesis. Next, you have the node and the internode, which is simply the area of the stem between nodes and are places where one or more leaves or buds are born. Finally, you have the pith. This is the inner core of the twig, and it functions in the storage and transport of nutrients to various parts of the tree. As the twig matures, pith cells die and lose their functionality. As the soft, spongy pith cells die, they break down, and at maturity can be hollow or chambered. Elderberry is perhaps the quintessential example of this. A couple of things to keep in mind regarding twigs and branches. Trees grow up, not out. The terminal bud is the most active. And part of that is the fact that it is the terminal bud, but also keep in mind that the terminal bud will deliver auxins generated by the plant that will naturally slow down those lateral buds in close proximity. Keep in mind that although lateral buds are often dormant, that can quickly change depending on what happens to the tree and if pruning potentially removes that terminal bud. I'm not going to spend hardly any time at all on this, but this is a nice graphic, and this issue will come up again when we talk about pruning. But keep in mind that a branch is connected to the trunk of a tree because of the interlocking nature of the branch and the trunk tissue occurring at the branch collar. Furthermore, healthy branch attachments are U-shaped and not V-shaped, as we can see from the next slide. As this picture shows, we have a healthy branch union on the left side of the screen with a prominent U shape, and then next to it, a much weaker V-shaped branch union. The trunk of the tree has an important role to play as it transports water and nutrients up and down the tree and provides structural support. Remember, the trunk grows out and not up. Starting from the outside and moving in, we have the outer bark, which protects the tree, insulates it, and is renewed from within. Then you have the inner bark, with the phloem to the outside, transporting food in the form of sugars, amino acids, vitamins, hormones, and etc. Moving inward, we have the cambium, which is an extremely thin cylinder of meristematic tissue found just under the bark. New cells are formed on both sides of the cambium each year. Heartwood is found at the center of the tree. It is composed of old xylem tissue that is no longer living, but still retains structural strength. Sapwood is the living xylem inside the cambial layer that is actively involved in fluid transport. Phloem is to the outside, just beneath the bark, and moves around water and sap. The tree rings found in trunks are a result of variations in growth rate and in the type of wood produced early and late in the growing season. Within each ring, the lighter wood is springwood, formed early in the season, with larger, thin-walled cells. The darker, thick-walled cells of the summer wood are formed later in the year. The xylem conducts water and nutrients throughout the tree to the leaves and provides some strength. The two components of xylem are the sapwood and heartwood. Sapwood is new wood. As newer rings of sapwood are laid down, inner cells turn to heartwood. Heartwood then is the central supporting pillar of the tree. It is dead, but it will not decay if the outer layers are intact. Lignin is a primary constituent of heart and sapwood. As we move to the roots of trees, just a quick mention about the root collar. This is where the main trunk of the tree thickens and is the point that should be planted at ground level. Field coordinators are told to preach not planting too deep because it really is one of the easiest ways to kill trees. So if you have an opportunity to plant some trees, be sure to look for the root collar and then be sure that that is what's planted at ground level. If your tree looks like a telephone pole going straight down into the ground like the photo on the left, it is planted incorrectly. We want to see the flare of the tree visible at ground level. Tree roots anchor the tree into the ground, absorb and transport water and nutrients and oxygen to other parts of the tree, as well as stores food, and from my perspective, keeps soil in place. As this diagram shows, roots are going to grow where conditions allow. Those conditions being moisture, oxygen, temperature, and nutrients. Absorbing roots are typically found in the upper 12 inches of soil, and as the name implies, is absorbing water and nutrients. Then you have the lateral roots, which are side roots that branch off from the main root. Then the sinker roots grow down from the lateral roots and help to anchor the tree in place. The taproot is the primary root of the tree. As this picture shows, roots are mostly towards the surface of the soil to facilitate oxygen exchange. Zooming in, we can see the thicker main roots give way to smaller and finer roots. Let's spend our last few minutes together talking about flowers, fruits, and seeds. Starting with flowers. A flower is the reproductive structure of flowering plants containing the male and female reproductive organs. Next, fruit is the mature, ripened ovary of a flowering plant containing the seeds, and it functions to protect and disperse the seeds to ensure continuation of the species. And finally, seeds. Seeds are the reproductive unit of the plant and contain several components, including the embryo, the endosperm, and the seed coat. Angiosperms bear flowers and fruit and are characterized by having seeds enclosed within a fruit. They are the dominant plant group on the planet, making up about 80% of all known living plants and 90% of all trees. The gymnosperms are this group of woody, perennial, seed-producing plants that often lack the protective outer covering which surrounds the seeds in flowering plants. This will include conifers, cycads, ginkgos as some of the most famous examples. And this is where cones come from. That's going to wrap things up for tree biology. Let's get to questions that folks may have.
All righty. Well, thank you for that, Jeff. Great video.
Well, let's just start off with the obvious. Yes, that was incorrect on the slides that you saw. Twigs grow up, not out. And of course, the trunk grows out, not up. So thank you, Lisa.
Another question we had, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about the distinction between a mulch volcano and a mulch donut? We'll talk a little bit about that in a different session, but it might be worth
Sure.
touching on here a little bit.
Well, mulch is so important for trees. It does many different things from keeping the ground covered so that the ground doesn't dry out, but it also keeps the lawnmowers and the weed eaters away from the base of that tree, something we call lawnmower blight. When they get too close and they nip the tree, it'll often go through the bark and into that cambium layer of the tree, which is that growing portion. You remember looking at the video there. And so mulch keeps those things away. And then, of course, when we put the mulch down, we want to put it on, a good 2 to 4 inches, but we want to keep it away from the stem, the trunk of the tree. So keep it away several inches. And that's why you would get that nice round donut or bagel or whatever the um, uh, shape is, but not the volcano that's, up against the base of the trunks.
Perfect. And there was another question I actually don't really know the answer to is how do trees planted in a hole in a cement sidewalk in a city survive? How do they get their roots out?
That is amazing. I have been to some places where, let me tell you what, basically the tree was growing there and they actually cemented all the way around it, but yet the tree survives, at least for a while, at least for a while. But in those types of conditions, trees just can't have long lives because there's just not room for them. So that's why when we look in cities, oftentimes hopefully there's more of a box that's cut out to allow the tree to grow within that sidewalk tree pit. Sometimes they're referred to, and of course, the bigger the tree pit, the better. But even then, we have some limited space. So in those cases, what we really want to do is try to find trees that are really tough and can handle those urban conditions, which is why we oftentimes see honey locusts in a lot of our I guess, jungles, you could say, our urban downtowns, because they can handle really tough conditions. Hackberry is another great tree that can handle some really rough conditions. So ultimately, they can't survive because they don't have the access to oxygen and things like that. Or maybe their roots are coming out like in a storm sewer or coming out somewhere else where they are able to get that oxygen exchange, but it's not coming at the upper level, at the surface level, where it just doesn't have enough room sometimes. So.
Okay, and we had a question from Lisa T asking, could you expand a little bit on the physiology that differentiates a hardwood versus a softwood?
Yeah, great question. So what's going to happen is the cells are going to be that much more tightly packed. That's why we talk about a lot of times the grain of a hardwood and how tight it is, versus some of these other species like the cottonwoods, even something like uh, the giant sequoias, which are really soft woods. That's how they can get so big. In fact, I love to tell my students when we talk about the oldest. Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. I just about gave it up. That's a quiz question I totally forgot about. Never mind. So it's really that the grain and then that cambium layer. And so keep in mind that cambium layer can grow quite a bit in a year, or it can grow not much in a year, depending on the resources that the tree has, moisture, access to nutrients, things like that. And so we often hear the thing, oh, oaks and other hardwoods, they grow so slow. Well, maybe compared to softwoods, but there's just a difference physiologically. But I think that I know that the research has been done to show that oaks can grow just as quickly as other hardwoods if they're cared for, if they're given enough water, if they're given enough nutrients. So there isn't necessarily anything inherent with the oaks. They just kind of get this bad rap sometimes. So, anyways, getting back to then the difference physiologically, it's going to be in how those cells within that cambium layer actually grow and then put on that tree ring, that layer. I hope that was adequate for what you were asking.
Sweet, awesome. We have a question here from Stacy Jones. If you have a tree that was planted too deep initially and you're 3 or 4 years down the road, what can you do to improve the longevity of that tree?
Boy, that's a tough one. Um, the root 3 or 4 years down the road, the roots are in place. So you're really, I mean, if we're honest here, if you want to try to do something about it, it means trying to remove and take some of that dirt away. And so that is a possibility. But depending on your landscape, do you have the capacity to move that volume away from the plant without, the wind and the rain filling it back in over time? I mean, that's a pretty big endeavor to change the overall landscape after the fact. So instead of that, let's just plant right the first time and don't plant too deep. So yeah, that's we always teach that to the kids because that is unfortunately one of the ways that we really kill trees too often is just not planting at the right depth. Pardon me.
And then we have a question from Marshall James. Can you speak more about the V-shaped branch versus the U-shaped branch? What would cause the bad V shape and what should be done about it?
Well, there's not much you can do after the fact. I mean, there are some things as fruit trees. If you're familiar with any of the tricks of the trade, there you can actually sometimes spread out some of the bad angles that you may see, but that's only when they're smaller and there's time for them to essentially widen out from a V to a U. Uh, but the point behind that is that's where we should be looking at in terms of pruning is pruning out some of those weak joints, those V joints versus those U joints that are going to be stronger to be able to handle the fruit load or just the load of the tree overall.
Sweet. We only have a couple more questions left. Josh asks, what happens if a terminal bud is damaged? Do the other buds just take over?
Oh yeah, great question. And so that certainly can happen. So lateral buds are typically just there kind of hanging out, but they can be pressed into action if that terminal bud gets nipped, if it gets damaged, and all of a sudden now it has to take over and become that terminal bud. And it's amazing how the plant knows that too. It responds to that injury and it jumps into action and says, "Uh-oh, we need to fix something. You're now the new main one. Go." So
Awesome, awesome. Let's see here. Marty and Ruth asks, do some species, i.e. walnuts, change their sex from year to year? Their experience is that in a group, certain trees produce excessive nut production some years, and other trees produce well in other years.
great question. Not to my knowledge, especially not with black walnuts, for instance. So they're not going to change sexes, but they certainly a lot of nut crops tend to alternate bear, heavy one year, light the next year. That's just a generality. Okay. However, there can certainly be differences in pollination, the weather conditions at the time. If we have really, so things like rain and moisture are not as conducive to pollination. Certainly, they can retard and impact some of that pollen cloud and stuff like that. And so, just naturally, we can get these variations where we can get heavy crops, we can get light crops. Certainly, we can get late spring freezes that can impact, in chestnuts, it can wipe out an entire crop and it doesn't have an opportunity to come back again. Other species are going to be able to put out a second flushing, perhaps, but I don't think it's necessarily changing the sex of the tree. But there is going to be that variation in pollination and then just alternate bearing that would explain why sometimes there's going to be heavy years versus those lighter years.
Perfect. One more question came up. Kate asks, if a tree keeps growing suckers at the base, was it likely planted incorrectly?
Well, maybe. So suckers traditionally are going to be some sort of a sign of stress from the tree that it needs. I mean, a tree, mind you, a tree. Um, but even I say that, depending on the tree, there can be a little bit of variation there because I mentioned I'm a hazelnut grower. So hazelnut trees, the European hazelnut grows as a single stem tree, but it does tend to sucker out and stuff like that just naturally, even though it is a true tree form. And so we have to go out. We don't have to, we grow shrubs, not trees, but in Oregon, they have to go out through and remove those suckers. Generally speaking, if you have a tree, though, single trunk, single stem, and it starts to send out suckers, um, again, it's probably stressed in some way. But I want to caution that because we get things like silver maples all the time that want to send out a sucker here or there. Just keep that in mind, I guess. There's not a hard and fast rule there. So I do want to say there's going to be some sort of damage, but depending on the species, that just can happen naturally. So
Okay, awesome. Well, we're at about 6:43, so thank you, Jeff, very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. I'm now going to send out a quick engagement poll, just testing you on some knowledge from the tree biology section. Should be popping up on your screen now. Also, right after this, we'll be moving into our tree identification section, so if anyone needs to use the restroom or anything, now would be a good time to do that.
I got to say, Jeff, sitting in the backyard amongst the trees, becoming a tree keeper, that is where it's at. Let me tell you.
That's the way to do it. Absolutely. All right, cool. Yeah, so question one, true or false? A U-shaped branch union is preferred over a V-shaped branch union. The answer to that one is going to be true. Yep. Looks like most everybody got that one. Number two, true or false? The stipule connects the leaf blade to the stem. And that one's going to be false. Yep.
It's the
Stipule.
petiole. The petiole connects the leaf to the stem of the tree.
Indeed. Number three here, true or false, the taproot grows out from the sides of the main root. It looks like pretty much everyone got that right. That is false. And then number four here, the xylem contains both the sapwood and the heartwood. Answer to that one is true. Good job for everyone who got that one. And then our last but not least question is the oldest known tree in the world is how old? Looks like 43% of you got that. That's older than 5,000 years old. Pretty remarkable. Sweet.
So just real quick, you guys are at home, go to your computers, Google world's oldest tree, and take a look at that gnarly tree. Think about how old it is, and then think about those giant sequoias just down the coast and how old and how big they are, and it's not even close. So.
All right. Well, thank you all for taking part in this quiz, and thank you again, Jeff. We really appreciate it. All righty. We're going to keep moving right along, and I will turn it over to Seth Adamson is going to run us through some information about tree identification.
All right, let me share my screen here. Start this.
Yep, I see it.
Oh, good stuff. Like Enzo said, my name's Seth Adamson. I'm the Growing Futures Coordinator in Des Moines. And a little bit of background about myself is that my background is not in trees whatsoever. And so about 3 years ago when I joined Trees Forever, I knew very little about trees and even less about tree ID. And so in the time that I've been with Trees Forever, I've actually come to know quite a few different species of trees and can identify them now. So hopefully I can share that all with you. So first, when we're trying to identify a tree, what we're essentially doing is asking it a series of questions to, figure out who it is. We're starting with mainly if it's deciduous or coniferous, and then getting more and more specific to figure out what species it is. And then after species, you can get into cultivar, where it's in the same family, like when we have silver maples or box elder maples or, white oaks and red oaks. But with that, you're getting more and more minute with the details. And so it kind of gets harder and harder to remember exactly what the differences are. One way to kind of mitigate that is through a dichotomous key. We won't spend a ton of time talking about these today, but they are a good tool to have, especially when you're first starting out trying to identify trees, or perhaps in the winter when there's less identifiers, meaning seed pods or leaves to go off of. And so they can be helpful when you are, looking for a guide. Especially with deciduous broadleaf trees. Conifers, they keep their needles, and so there's more to go with. Whereas with these, with deciduous trees in the thick of winter, good luck unless you know your bark. And so, give me one moment. Apologies. With deciduous trees, they are broadleaf. provide shade, lose their leaves. Some of them will have different flowers or different fruit, and they can be our understory ornamental trees or our overstory shade trees. Conifers, they'll keep their needles all throughout the year. They can be good to block the wind. Flowers are pine cones, and typically they won't get as high up. I like to think of deciduous trees as kind of as a typical tree. You know, when you're in kindergarten, you draw a tree and it's got that big crown. And so for me, it's easier to start with deciduous and recognize that there are some deciduous trees that look like conifers, but it's not, it's easier to know which ones those are than to spend more time on conifers, especially for our role. Conifers, we don't plant a ton of those, and so just kind of honestly don't know as much about how to identify them. Kind of a visual representation of how they can look different. With deciduous trees, we have our alternate or opposite leaf arrangements. And so with opposite, we're looking for it to be more parallel on each side of the branch. Whereas with alternate, we want that, you know, one on this side goes higher up and then one on the other side higher up too. With alternate and opposite, we can get pinnately and palmately and compound arrangements. This kind of shows how those all can be. With our doubly compound and some of our pinnately and palmately compounded leaves, they might look similar, but a lot of them will be different based upon how many different types of leaves and then that specific arrangement of whether it's symmetrical or not. This explains more as far as that specific number of leaves, and then with pinnately coming from the petiole, whereas palmately will come from a central point. This is just kind of a pre-test. When we get to the test part, we'll actually try to identify each of these. So if you don't worry, we'll bring up the slide again. But if you're able to try to kind of remember what these leaves and shapes are like, we'll then go over these afterwards. So now we'll just look over some common trees in Iowa. When it comes to ash trees, we don't plant these anymore, strictly because of emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer has decimated ash trees in Iowa. It's found in 99 out of 100 counties. It has pretty much just wiped ash trees, not only from Iowa, but from the Midwest in general, and is continuing to do damage. And so if you're able to find an ash tree that hasn't been impacted by this, kudos to you. But otherwise, I know in my experience, I haven't seen very many. So it's, while it was a common tree, it's unfortunately not becoming one so much anymore. With maple trees, they're distinguishable by that leaf that is the Canadian flag. We have a few that are native to Iowa, but then apart from that, there are tons and tons of different cultivars that are bred to just have different characteristics as far as what specific colors they have, when they're coloring in the fall, just tons and tons of different ways to kind of breed maples. One of our colleagues, Nick McGrath, had said that he thinks of maples as the Starbucks of trees, and I have to agree in the fact that, you know, there's tons of different Starbucks. They might be minutely different, but they're pretty much all the same. With oak trees, they have more differentiation, I would say, than maples, and so in my opinion, they're a little bit more interesting. We have our main white and red oaks, and so the way I tend to remember white oaks compared to red oaks and pin oaks is if we look at red oak, and pin oak leaves, they're more pointed with their lobes compared to white and swamp white. And so if you think of a red oak, if it were, harder than a leaf, and it were to prick you, you would bleed. Whereas with a white oak, that wouldn't happen because it's not as sharp. And so I tend to that's how I remember that a little bit. Here we have an elm tree, American elm. We plant New Horizon American elms a lot. They're an overstory tree that can get anywhere from 50 to 100 feet. They have a somewhat of a cylindrical crown, so kind of grow up straight. You won't see as much of an expanded crown compared to oaks or sycamores. That leaf there, it'll be an alternating leaf with a serrated edge, meaning that it's got those ridges in between. Here we have redbud. An easy way to kind of remember with their leaf shape is that it somewhat looks like a heart. So if you think of heart and red, those two kind of go together. You get that really pretty purple pinkish color in the late spring. And then they're also identified by their almost green bean type seed pod. With redbuds, they are an understory ornamental tree, so they're only going to get up to 20 to 30 feet. Honestly, when they first get planted, they look almost more like a bush, and you have to really prune them early on, or else you'll see a lot of growth go out, and you'll get multiple leaders, which you don't want when you're first trying to establish it. And so people will kind of look at you funny when you plant one and it's like, oh, there's just some sticks there. But in a few years, they get to actually be really pretty. Here we have a seed pod, leaf, and bark from sycamore. We don't plant sycamores specifically, but we do plant London plane trees. And so with London plane trees, they're a cross between an American sycamore and an oriental plane. And while there are specifically or distinctly different trees, the differences are pretty minute in my opinion. I think with London planes, the seed pods are in duos compared to singles with sycamores. The bark can be slightly different, but for the most part, it's still that kind of whitish interior after you peel off that initial layer. The leaf, I would say, kind of looks somewhat like a maple, but with less pronounced points on the sides. And so it can be kind of confusing, but really when they're leafed out, and if you can find a seed pod, that's a good indicator that you have a sycamore or London plane tree. This is a picture of a tulip leaf. It's interesting in the fact that it does not come to a single point, and then it actually somewhat looks to be in the shape of a tulip flower. That's how I'm able to remember it. They can get pretty tall as well, with a medium sized crown, kind of wide, but not super wide. With tulip trees, you'll get these really nice flowers that attract plenty of pollinators and hummingbirds, and actually smell pretty good too. Tulips are honestly a really good tree. I enjoy that we plant them. Here we have hackberry, really distinguishable by its warty bark. It can get up to 50 to 70 feet. They have that serrated edge on the leaf, making them similar to elms, but they're distinguishable by the fact that they'll have berries, the literal hackberries, and then, like I said, that bark is really kind of that distinguishing factor. Next, we have birch trees. I really enjoy birches, if not for the bark. I like that they're in riparian zones, so you'll see a lot of life around them. They're a good kind of piece of that ecosystem near wetlands and streams and whatnot. We have a few different ones that are native to Iowa, including, I believe, paper birch and river birch. They kind of have a smaller serrated leaf. And yeah, next we have the Kentucky coffee tree. You have compound leaves with this, as well as a distinguishable seed pod that produces these somewhat coffee bean looking seeds, where in previous times people have brewed them for coffee, similar to chicory. When we first plant Kentucky coffee trees, a lot of people will think that they are sticks that are just put in the ground because they won't have a lot of branches to begin with. But rest assured, they do grow up to be, close to that 100-foot mark with pretty wide canopies. Another interesting fact about Kentucky coffee trees is that their large seed pods are indicators that they acted as food for megafauna in prehistoric times, and that was their method of seed dispersal. Next, we have honey locust, another tree with a distinguishable seed pod and compound leaves as well. You can see that they also have those gigantic thorns that kind of act as a natural defense. They'll get that yellowish green color in the spring and summer, and then it'll taper off to more of a yellowish brown color in the fall. Next, we will have catalpa, another one with a similar seed pod, or distinguishable seed pod, I should say, where it almost looks like a vanilla bean. With catalpas, you'll have these gigantic leaves that almost look like, like if you had mentioned a dinosaur eating a leaf. That's what I think of. They can get pretty tall as well, close to 100 feet. Just a really nice overstory tree. Next, we have ginkgos. While ginkgos aren't native to Iowa, they're an interesting tree in the fact that they give off these really nice little flowers, and then they can be, I apologize, I had a note on this and I can't seem to find it. I believe that they are sexually dimorphous in the fact that they can switch sexes depending on if there is a male or female. I probably am getting that somewhat wrong, but that's kind of the interesting thing about ginkgo trees. For conifers, we have a few different ones that are native to Iowa: arborvitae, juniper, fir, spruce, pine, and larch. Those are the distinct conifer species, and then from there we get our different cultivars. With pine, we have white pine that is native to Iowa. An easy way to remember that is it'll have 5 needles in its bundle, and white has 5 letters. For spruces and firs, it's easy to remember in the fact that a spruce needle will hurt you, it'll poke you, but a fir needle will actually, it won't hurt you as much. It can still not feel comfortable, but spruce ones are going to be a little bit sharper. With pine, like I had said before, is the only one that the eastern white is native to Iowa specifically, and it'll have those 5 needles in its bunch. This tree is actually one of those ones I kind of talked at the beginning, where it's a deciduous tree, but it looks like a conifer. This is a bald cypress, where it'll have those needles. It'll kind of grow up in the form of that pointed look like a true evergreen, but it'll actually change colors and will shed its needles. We do plant bald cypresses here in Des Moines. It's actually a pretty cool tree, along with the Dawn redwood, and the fact that those are both, conifers that, or deciduous trees that look like conifers. And then here are those leaves I had mentioned earlier. And so if you just want to share in the chat, I guess, kind of what they are or what you think they might be from the previous slides, you can go ahead and do that real quick. Actually, I'll go back and give a little bit more time. give it about 2 more minutes in case anybody wants to answer anything else.
While we have just a couple of minutes here, which we're waiting for folks to wrap up, just to point out a couple of things from the chat. Yes, ginkgos are dioecious, and so that simply means that they have their male and female organs on separate trees. So one tree will have the male organs, one tree will have the female organs versus monoecious. And of course, I'm familiar with that because hazelnuts are monoecious. So on a single hazelnut tree or shrub, there's going to be both the female flowers and there's going to be the male catkins. Now, they're not self-compatible. Some things are self-compatible, but they are on the same plant. That's monoecious and dioecious.
Thank you, Jeff. I had a note on that and I completely forgot it. So yes, thank you for clearing that up. All right. So looking at the chat, it looks like Lisa got all of them correct. In that A is sycamore, B is catalpa, C is redbud, D is Don redwood, E is honey locust. Oh, F is actually elm. I'm sorry, didn't see that you answered birch there, but F is elm, and then G is Kentucky coffee tree. Now we can open this up to any questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Seth. We appreciate it. Let's see. One of the first questions I had, let me scroll up real quick. So Alyssa asks, why are hybrid sycamore, or why a hybrid sycamore and not the Native American sycamore as far as planting commonly?
I believe that with the hybrid, they're easier for nurseries to grow, and so just the kind of the fact that they're easier and people will still buy them as a sycamore. Kind of it's more of a nursery decision, I believe.
Perfect. Jerry asks, he has a green ash that they've treated a few times and has a lot of dead branches. And he's wondering, should he keep investing in this tree or is he putting off the inevitable? In your opinion?
I would guess, yeah, putting off the inevitable. If it's already looking like it's not doing too hot, even injecting it with anything, it's just not gonna recover, unfortunately.
Joshua also asks, can we expect the longhorn beetle to affect box elder bugs? I don't know if you know anything about those.
I haven't heard anything about that one. I have
Okay.
heard that there is a pathogen for, or a pest coming for maples. Lexi, she would know a lot more about that. So if you are able to keep that question for next week, she's
I
the
can
one that's
address
kind of
that, Seth.
what's
So here's the thing. Asian longhorn beetles are going to primarily affect the maple trees, but box elders as a secondary species could be susceptible as well. But by and large, the real concern with the Asian longhorn beetle is certainly those maples, which they tend to feed on. Now, keep in mind, these Asian longhorn beetles we're talking about, just Google them. They're not the little ladybugs. They're not the Japanese beetles. These are large beetles that you can see and remove and stuff like that. But just give them a Google. You'll take a look at them, but they can, as a secondary species, affect box elder.
Perfect. Josh asks, are larches technically conifers since they drop their needles?
I believe they are still conifers, yes. It's one of those
Yes.
trees I don't know much about. So Jeff, if you got more
Well,
expertise.
so what makes them interesting is, yes, they are still conifers because they still have if we look back to my presentation, they still have that cone, right? And so they're in the same family, Lanix, I believe it is. And so they still have that cone, conifer, but what makes them unique is they are deciduous. They are deciduous because they lose their leaves, needles like that. But yes, they are still conifers. Fun plant. beautiful too.
Indeed. Let's see here. Laura asks, actually, Laura, I could probably answer this one. As far as how many seasons or years should we use watering bags around new trees in our yard to make sure they get enough water to grow healthily? I know typically 2 years is recommended for having water bags. I don't know if you guys have heard different things.
Generally
Oh,
speaking, I would concur with that. Yep.
yeah,
A lot of it's going to be the health of the tree and all these other things. But 2 years and get them off. And
yeah, I would agree. 2 years is what our length is.
Let's see here. Jerry asks, does Trees Forever do any tracking as to planting survival and success rates? And do we work with the Living Land and Waters Oak Trees Planting Initiative? As far as the first one, we do use a lot of GIS systems, such as Tree Plotter or ArcGIS to kind of track tree survival and success like that. Jeff, I don't know if you can speak to the Living Lands and Waters part.
well, that's Chad Pagraki's group. And so the answer is yes, we're involved with them to a certain extent. In fact, I just met or spoke with one of our field coordinators in Illinois, Eric Notes, and he's preparing to do a tree walk with those folks, the Living Lands and Waters. So yes, stay tuned for that because that's going to be coming up here sometime in April. But yeah, what a great organization and they do great work there. So.
Perfect. All right, let me scan and see if we have any more. Yeah, Michelle asks if you have an ash that has holes in the trunk, is that a sign of ash borers?
Most of the answers in the chat have been spot on. Not necessarily. If it has that distinct capital D shaped, that is an indicator. But there are other things that feed on ash trees, other borers that are going to feed on ash trees. So it might not. Just seeing those holes is not going to be an indication that it's been infected by EAB. What you're primarily going to see first and foremost is some dieback from the crown. So the top of the tree, the crown of the tree is going to start dying back a little bit. And then before you would ever see the D-shaped holes is you might see some woodpecker flecking, blonding, we call it, because that's them trying to get down there and get underneath the bark essentially. And so if you see some of those signs of it dying back and some of that blonding and flecking, yes, then there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be succumb to EAB. And then of course, having an arborist come out or a consulting forester to confirm that diagnosis, of course. But we're so infested across the state that if you see your ash trees dying, I mean, it's probably EAB. Let's just be honest. Now, that being said, I live way up here in north central Iowa, northern Kossuth County, and Emmett County, just next door, was the last county to officially have EAB be confirmed. And so even before we had EAB confirmed, we were seeing, I'd say over the last 10 years, we were seeing some issues with ash trees that were dying. In fact, the Grettinger Golf Course had about 100 ash trees that perished, I want to say 3 years ago. I thought for sure it was EAB. And I called the folks, Mike down in Idals, and I said, hey, I think we got it finally here. And he sent some folks up, and it was not EAB. So there are other stressors that are impacting our trees from drought and other things like that. But certainly once EAB gets here, it's just a matter of time before it's going to wipe out those ash trees.
Perfect. All right. See if we got any more questions here. All right, I'm not seeing any right now. So yeah, thank you very much, Jeff and Seth. Great job, guys. We appreciate it. So yeah, just I think we're going to start wrapping down this session today. What I really wanted to do quickly is kind of walk all you guys through our website real quick here. Just give me a second to share my screen. All right, hopefully you can see the Trees Forever website here, but this is going to be your kind of go-to shop for finding resources or more information about stuff. A couple things I wanted to kind of spotlight. We've got the Tree Keepers page here. If anyone still wants to register or learn more, they can find that here. We also have, I wanted to spotlight, we have upcoming Tree Keeper field days. So what field days are, is events that are going to be happening in our Cedar Rapids and Des Moines metro areas, and then we're going to have a few kind of happening in kind of other rural areas that are going to range from just kind of hands-on practical applications of what you've learned here. So kind of the pressing ones here on April 3rd, we have a tree identification session in Cedar Rapids. You can find more about that. April 10th, we have an invasive species removal also in Cedar Rapids. In Des Moines on the 19th and the 26th, we've got a couple sessions coming up. And this list will just keep growing. So make sure to check back frequently for more opportunities. Another resource, and I'll send out a link to this, is if you go to treesforever.org/TK resources, this will kind of take you to a landing page where you'll be able to find eventually all the recordings and more information as that comes up. So that's a work in progress, but yeah, just come over to treesforever.org/TK resources, and I'll send that link in a future email. Just fill out your information, you'll be able to access that. Another thing for you guys that is going to be pretty important is our volunteer page. So if you go to the Trees Forever website, come over here to our Get Involved section, or if you find our calendar somewhere and click on the volunteer page. This here is a portal for everything you need to know about our volunteer opportunities. So depending on where you are, I'm going to click in Iowa, and it's going to pull up a calendar with all of our upcoming events here. So you can see this week we've got some webinars going on, some tree voucher sessions if you're in the Cedar Rapids area. But once you click on one of these opportunities that look interesting to you, it'll have all the information you need, a registration area. If it's sort of a more hands-on kind of tree planting event, it'll have a waiver. But yeah, feel free to check this frequently for more volunteer opportunities. And even if you haven't completed the course yet, we absolutely welcome everyone to come out and help us out with planting some trees. All right. Well, with that being said, that's going to bring us to the end of our very first session. So I want to thank all of you for taking the time to learn a little bit about trees with us. Thank you again, Jeff and Seth. Great job today. And yeah, like I said, this session was recorded, so I'll be sending out a recording later this week, as well as the link to our next session. If you have any further questions, if you want to hang out here for a little bit, you can kind of ask us some stuff. Otherwise, feel free to send me an email and I can get you in touch with the correct person. But with that being said, I know we're a little ahead of schedule, but thank you all for joining us tonight. And I
Hold
hope
up, Enzo. Don't
sorry,
cancel
never
us.
mind. Cancel it, yeah.
Tree guides. I put in the chat there. The best tree guide is Vanderlinden and Farrar, and I put a link in the chat there. By far, that one is what I was handed as when I first started at Trees Forever, not having a forestry background. And so that one is fantastic. But I also want to make a plug for the tree booklets. So Trees Forever distributes the tree and shrub guides of Iowa freely all over the place. And so contact a field coordinator or contact our office. We have those, and they are great because they have the basics of the most common trees and shrubs with some nice pictures and what the leaves look like. And those are free, certainly. So if folks are interested in that, that's a nice little guide to help you as you're out walking around thinking to yourself, hey, what is that tree? Of course, the leaves help, let's be honest, right?
All righty, cool. Well, yeah, I'll send out a link to that in our next email. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. And like I said, if you have any further questions, feel free to let us know. Thank you all and have a good night. And we'll see you next on, I believe it is April 1st. Will be our next session. Yep.
Thanks,
Tuesday,
Lisa.
April 1st, 6 to 7:30. All right. Take care, everybody. right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end this session, but thank you again all for joining me. And if you have any further questions, feel free to send me an email and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you all and have a great night.